this March 8th edition of the Courier Paperboyz. I'm sports editor Doug Newhoff, and I'm joined today by our all-tournament sports writers, Jim Sullivan and Nick Pateros. Let's talk a little college basketball, guys. It's March Madness, and that was never more evident than it was in St. Louis last weekend. UNI wins 3 nail-biters in 3 days, one in overtime and one on the last-second shot to get into the NCAA tournament. Talking with Coach Jacobson yesterday at the UNI coaches luncheon, he said it reminded him a little bit of 2004 when they kind of came from nowhere and won 2 close games and then beat Missouri State in double overtime to win the championship. Sully, you were down there this weekend. Looked like a great atmosphere and some really good basketball. Did you see this coming?
Not exactly like this. Frankly, to be honest, I thought they'd have a really tough time getting past Wichita State in the semifinals, and especially 5 minutes in the game when they're down 10 and they couldn't throw the ball in the ocean.
But fortunate they weren't down a lot more than 10.
And the defense deserves some credit for that. And Wichita State just has a tough time scoring now and then. Their inside people look like they should be good, and then they seem to disappear. But overall, it was a tremendous effort by them. It was a really good tournament. I mean, obviously there were 1 or 2 games that were out of hand, but the 2 games on Thursday night were pretty solid. Wichita State had a very, very tough time with Loyola, and that was an entertaining game. Ron Baker saved them there. And all 3 of UNI's games were very, very tight, tied in the final minute of regulation. And as you said, one went to overtime. The championship game decided by Wes Washburn's shot at the horn. Very entertaining basketball. Again, defense-oriented, but still the intensity was such and the competitiveness was such that you really couldn't take your eyes off it.
Do you think that Wichita State is kind of or UNI's kind of in the heads of Wichita State a little bit? I mean, they have a hard time making the plays that they need to make in crunch time games when they play the Panthers.
That's certainly possible. And in a way, now you step back and look at it, you can make the argument that UNI matches up pretty well with them, at least this particular team. And it shouldn't be that way. One reason would be the rise of Clint Carlson, who may give away a little bit of height and a little bit of size, but is perfectly willing to battle a guy like Shaq Morris inside.
Right.
The guards match up better than you'd think, really. I mean, Washburn outplayed Van Vliet throughout the tournament. Van Vliet didn't, I don't know if he's still in some ways not 100%, but didn't look like the Van Vliet you'd expect to see. With Baker, they can defend him. Pretty have guys that can defend him. Bohannon hangs in with them. Jeremy Morgan is a great matchup for him because he can stay with them.
Sure.
So in that case, I think they do. Wichita should have an advantage with depth, but doesn't, because McDuffie didn't really do very much the last 2 times. He was very productive in the first game. So yeah, it's mental, but I think it's also a kind of a physical thing where they would match up better than you might think.
From a personal standpoint, I mean, I really enjoyed Sunday's game against Evansville, and it wasn't because of how it turned out so much, it's because of how it played out. UNI gets a big lead. I mean, they could have really buried them during that one stretch late in the first half and then again early in the second half, and it doesn't happen. Evansville makes some great adjustments. Jalen Brown gets going and makes UNI do some things they didn't really want to do and adjust their defense. All of a sudden, Valentine's getting layups. I was glad that they didn't have to go to overtime, because the way that game turned around and the way it was headed, I don't think overtime would have been a good thing for UNI.
I don't think so either. UNI really seemed to have a tough time finding answers to some of the things Evansville was doing late in the second half. And this has happened to this team now and then throughout the year, where they just seem to stop finding ways to score. At the end, of course, they went to their old bread and butter high ball screen, and Washburn got it done. But yeah, with the way Valentine was going, I think it would have been tough. They took care of Mock, the big guy, but Jalen Brown was a big, big difference in that game. And I think they were really depending on him not playing well, and he didn't for a long stretch of time. Then he got going, he got hot, and it forced Jeremy Morgan to pay more attention to him, or whoever was guarding him. I was a little surprised they didn't switch things up a little bit, maybe try to put Morgan on Valentine and Washburn on Brown. They never did that. It did work out, though. So yeah, that shot, I think, that Washburn had at the horn cured a lot of potential ills.
It did. I also thought there were 3 really good decisions made on UNI's part at the end of that game. The first one, I was glad that Coach Jacobson didn't call the timeout, because it really didn't give Evansville time to consider all the potential scenarios and set up a couple different defensive options. They didn't have a chance to talk about it. I mean, they had to just adjust on the fly and deal with whatever UNI was bringing at them. Second one, I thought it was a great decision to put the ball in Washman's hands and keep it there. Reduce the risk of a turnover, and allowed him to run it down to virtually zero, so that there wasn't going to be any chance that Evansville gets the ball back. And then third, I thought Washman made a great decision. If he takes that ball to the rim, he probably gets clobbered and the foul probably doesn't get called. So the best option for him was to pull up and take that shot, as contested as it was. I mean, looking at our photo editor Matt Putney's photos, I mean, there is literally that much room between DJ Valentine's hand and that ball. So he just barely got it over him, but that was his best option, I thought, and he was wise enough, savvy enough, mature enough to realize that and make the right choice.
Valentine made a nice recovery on that. The interesting thing about that, if you go back a little earlier on the play, Morgan was the guy that set the high ball screen. As these things go, it wasn't a particularly emphatic, strong screen, but Evansville seemed perfectly willing to make the switch. I mean, it was Brown went to Morgan, Valentine went to Washman, and that was a match that Jake said he wanted, and you almost get the feeling that was a match that Evansville wanted, that they wanted Valentine on Washman, because had they not, I think they would put up a little more of a fight to try to, fight through Morgan's screen or do something else, but I think that's what they wanted, and it worked out very well. I think, yeah, Jake said that basically he didn't want to call timeout. He thought there was an advantage once the shot clock was where it was, the game clock was where it was. He wanted just to run it down, leave nothing for Evansville to work with at the end of regulation time. So that decision worked out well. Yeah, Washman had gone to the rim earlier in that game, got clobbered, as he said, and got no call. So that may have been in the back of his mind, but it all added up to a very good decision at the end of the game.
It sure did.
Good composure by Wes, too. You look at that on TV, and you could see Coach Jake even mentioning, all right, come on, let's go. And he waited for his time, found the right moment, and just hit a shot he was comfortable with there.
Yeah, that was fun stuff. And he got a lucky bounce. I mean, let's be
Sure.
honest. I mean, the ball went off the back of the rim, up and back through, but they put themselves in position to give themselves that chance, and that's what's important, I guess, not how the end result got finished or came to be. Let's move over to the Hawkeyes. They finished the regular season with what I thought was a good win at Michigan. Utah seemed to be back on his game. He had 29 points, I think, and a bunch of rebounds, and they played well, so they got a little bit of momentum back heading into the Big Ten tournament this week.
Yeah, they really do. And as you said, it was badly needed a game to win. It didn't look like it was going to be an easy game to win. Michigan's got some things to play for at the end of the year here, so it wasn't a gimme. And so it worked out well for them. And now here we are at the eve of the Big Ten tournament, which is now runs 14 days to get all the buys in. I mean, it's like the old Big East used to be, and I don't like it personally, but there's nothing you can do about it. Iowa's draw, as near as I can tell, is pretty favorable. They get Minnesota or Illinois. They've beaten both of those teams, and both are really struggling. Purdue would await them if they win that in the quarterfinals. They've beaten Purdue. If they get to the next level, then they've got a choice of Northwestern, Michigan, Indiana. You have to believe they'll be either the Wolverines or the Hoosiers, I think, when they've beaten both those teams. So they really caught a break because Maryland, Michigan State, Wisconsin are all on the other side, and of course those mighty Nittany Lions that Iowa lost to early in the year are also over there. So I think things are shaping up well. Now the whole question is, can Iowa take advantage of this? And that's been a little bit of a problem for them in past years, getting to the down the road a little bit. So we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know that we can say that Iowa is back to the level they were at, a month ago or 6 weeks ago, but at least they've got a little bit of momentum going into the tournament. And they start, Thursday? Against Illinois and Minnesota winner.
So it'd be, the first game is 11 a.m., that's Northwestern Michigan, and then Iowa go
1:30.
Yeah, thereabouts.
1 o'clock-ish.
A lot of these seasons, you look at it and you wonder how much the conference tournament matters for teams that are already going to be in the NCAA tournament like Iowa. I think this is an example of a year that Iowa needs to make a little bit of a run in the conference tournament just to get some of that momentum back that they had earlier in the season.
And of course, at any time like that will help seeding as well, where you go, and so on for the tournament. So there are a lot of things for the Hawkeyes to play for.
We'll get to the seeding issue here in a couple of minutes. Let's talk a little bit about the Cyclones. They played Kansas in their regular season finale. Didn't win, but played them. They were competitive. Played them pretty tight. I thought played pretty well for the most part. And now they head into their the Big 12 tournament, and their first game is a tough one. I mean, they've got to play number 6 ranked Oklahoma Thursday in their first game of the tournament, so do you guys like where the Cyclones are heading as their postseason starts?
Boy, that's a great question. You look at the bracket, and where could it have been easier for them, and the answer is practically nowhere. I mean, unless they finished first or second. It's such a tough league this year. In their defense, Iowa State's defense, they have beaten Oklahoma once at Hilton, played them pretty tough down in Norman, so there's a chance of, you just don't know where this team is on any given day. And on top of that, Monte Morris has a bit of a shoulder problem. They expect him to play, but we don't know if he's 100% yet. So again, with Iowa State, there's just so many things that we don't know where they're going. I'm not sure anyone foresaw them winning the tournament last year when they did that, and somehow they found a way to get hot and do it. And then if they get past Oklahoma this time, they likely get West Virginia, and that's not been a good matchup for them this year. But again, no matter which way you turn, you're going to be facing a pretty good team somewhere down the road. So I guess might as well get one out of the way sooner rather than later.
It's Iowa State team too that traditionally has really done well in that Big 12 tournament, and you look at how strong they played at Kansas even in a losing cause. It's almost one of those deals where you just want to see them find a way to close out a couple more games. They've been in lots of games with a lot of talented teams, but to find that kind of killer instinct, you mentioned UNI that they had 3 games where they're tied with 50 seconds to go, and they ended up winning all 3 of those at the NBC tournament. You want to see some of those players on Iowa State's team step up late in games and make something happen.
It's all about fatigue too. I think, how much will Niang have left in the tank? Is he the obvious choice? Monte Morris is the other obvious choice.
And they're playing pretty thin rotation.
Yes. So you need someone like Deontay Burton to really play well.
We did see a little bit more energy, I would say, out of Jameel McKay in the Kansas game, which was good to see. He's kind of been a non-factor for the previous 2 weeks or so. So we'll see what happens. That'll be some great basketball.
It really should be. Really should be.
Speaking of the postseason, I learned again this morning why I don't really put much stock in bracketology. Joe Lenardi, the alleged bracket expert, has UNI in his bracket as a number 14 seed. He's got them playing Indiana in the first round in Des Moines. He's got Iowa and Iowa State as number 5 seeds, and he's got Wichita State as a number 7 seed, which all sound about right to me, but UNI at 14, I mean, that really surprises me. I would have thought they'd be in the 7, 8, 9 range.
You think down there, the feeling was that they'd be maybe a little bit lower than that, 10, 11, 12, who knows? I don't spend a lot of time worrying about that for the reasons you just stated. And Joe Lenardi, people seem to really take him and Jerry Paul and all these other fellows seriously. But you think about it, it's like you're taking a math test with bracketology, and then at the very end you get to see the answers, and then you get to go back and change the ones you got wrong. I mean, that's basically how bracketology works. It's don't take it so seriously, people out there. It's just like a guy guessing. Maybe he has a very educated guess, but he's still guessing, and we'll see where UNI ends up. Having said that, if somehow this works out, they play Indiana, that's a pretty good matchup for UNI.
Especially in Des Moines, if they get that in Des Moines.
Yeah. That'll work out pretty well. I think I like their chances.
Yogi Ferrell and Wes Washburn.
Yeah.
On the big stage. That would be fun.
It would be fun.
Plus give Coach Jake time to get ready for a game against a good team right off the bat. I think that makes UNI more dangerous if they, if they're like a 14 or 13 seed and they're playing the toughest team early on. I think they've shown that they can go out and knock off a really good team, and the more time you give them to prepare for a really good team, I think their odds of having some success maybe increase.
It's interesting. Just for the sake of comparison, I mean, Wichita State is, according to Lenardi, Wichita State's the 7th seed and UNI's a 14 seed. So records, UNI's 22-12, Wichita's 24-9, 24-8. Strength of schedule, UNI's number 95, Wichita State's 119. Versus the top 25, UNI's 2-0, Wichita State's 1-1. Versus the top 50, UNI's 4-1, Wichita State's 1-3. In their last 12 games, UNI's 11-1, Wichita State's 9-3. Head-to-head, UNI beat Wichita State twice, won the Missouri Valley Conference tournament. So how do you get Wichita State as a 7 and UNI as a 14?
I saw that night with that as the exact same question, and you can make the argument that maybe Wichita should be seeded higher than UNI, although I wouldn't agree with that, but not a difference of, let's say, 7. That's absurd. And the only possible reason for seeding Wichita that high would be the injury to Van Vliet earlier, and Lenardi's giving him a pass for that. But you can't give it the whole thing. And the only significant win they have is Utah, pretty much out of the non-conference. And The other thing is maybe Lunardi's putting a lot of stock in the 2 losses to Illinois, Missouri State and so on, but again, how does that account for putting, Wichita State that far ahead of you and I, or even ahead of them? It really doesn't, in my opinion.
My biggest fear is that there are people sitting on the selection committee that actually look at Joe Lunardi's bracket and think he has some idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, I hope they're looking at metrics and not that, but
I hope
but
so.
I honestly don't know.
We got another pretty good basketball story in the metro area. The UNI women wrapped up the regular season championship, did it the hard way too. They had to go on the road and win 2 games, one against Southern Illinois, which is a tough opponent, and one against Evansville, which is not such a tough opponent, but still you have to play at their place. And they got it done. They went and won those 2 games, completed the regular season championship. Now they're the #1 seed for their tournament this week. They start Friday. Over in Moline, Illinois, good venue for the Panthers. They'll be able to get some fans over there. And Nick, you've been with this team all year. Just to bring us up to date, I guess, with where they're at and where they're going.
The one thing that's really impressive is what I haven't had a chance to see is how they've played on the road. I mean, this is a team that's only lost 1 road game in league play, and that was a final second game to Loyola. Other than that, they've beaten the best teams in the conference on the road, and that's why they're going to be the #1 seeds for the conference tournament. Just a really good team that can really beat really good teams on the road. Their defense is what's gotten them to this point. And I think their starting 5 is really starting to gel. You're seeing more out of Steph Davison, a senior, and that's what you needed to kind of balance things out. You've got a little bit of an inside presence with Jen Keitel, and Madison Weekly, I think by the time it's all said and done, she'll be in the mix for Player of the Year consideration. Her shooting efficiency's really increased as the season's gone on, a lot of confidence, and she had some big shoes to fill coming in after Jackie Keelan had run the point or run that shooting guard spot, kind of the combo guard for 6 years with the program, and I think she's done a really nice job of kind of leading this team.
The general school of thought is that UNI has to win this tournament to get in the NCAA tournament. Is that the way you see it too?
Yeah, they look at RPIs a lot, and I think their RPI is still 100. The Missouri Valley Conference is, I think, ranked 20th as far as difficulty for leagues. In the RPI, it's not quite, it doesn't translate like the men's game. This has been a one bid league, and the team that's dominated the conference over the past few years has been Wichita State. They're having an off rebuilding year, and that's why the conference RPIs dropped so much. So yeah, there's no question they have to win the MVC tournament to get into the NCAA tournament.
Well, for the season that they've had, I hope they're able to get that done and continue playing on the big stage. I mean, they're going to a postseason tournament of some kind, I would think, regardless.
Oh, yep, they have the expanded field for the WNIT, so I imagine they'll play in that if they should get eliminated in the tournament. But you have to like their chances. They'll match up probably against Wichita State in the quarterfinals. It'd be them or Bradley. Wichita State's a really young team, like I mentioned before. They've handled them pretty well in the previous 2 meetings. And then you have Southern Illinois, who they just beat on the road, so that they know that really, they know what they need to do against them. And I think it'd be really interesting if there's a UNI Drake final. Those have been 2 very entertaining games during the regular season. With it being the first year in the Quad Cities, I think you'd have some fans there for that one. And I think, for the MVC's perspective, I don't think they could do any better than getting those 2 teams in the championship game.
That would be good. We got another women's basketball team that's on a pretty good roll up in Wartburg, or up in Waverly with Wartburg. Kind of a surprise that they've won their first 2 NCAA tournament games. Now they're in the Sweet 16. They play St. Thomas Friday night, I believe, in St. Paul. I think St. Thomas is ranked 8th, but I don't know about you guys, but I think it's a pretty good story. And what do you know about where the Knights are going?
Well, it's kind of interesting. I've had a chance the past couple of years to cover them in that tournament they play before they get into conference play, and they've always done pretty well in that. And this year in particular, they beat a couple ranked teams in that tournament, and they got into the rankings themselves. And then they got into conference play, and I think they had some injuries, and they went into kind of a slump. And it was really surprised me with how well they've been playing their non-conference schedule. And I think, it's just a group that's gotten healthy, and Coach Amesbury up there has done a really great job with that program. And, I think the pieces are really falling together, and it's neat to see them make a run here in basketball. You haven't seen a Wartburg a basketball program reach this level in a long time, if ever, I don't think.
And we've got Kaylee Kladovo, is that how
Yep,
she pronounces it, playing pretty well inside, and the Somer twins at guard, and unfortunately for the softball team, that they don't have the Somers right now, but it's been good for the basketball team, so we'll keep an eye on them this weekend and hope that they can keep it going. Boys basketball is in their state tournament as well. You guys have been involved with that. Got started Monday. Gladbrook-Rhinebeck got a big game from Smokin' Joel Smolt, which is not unusual, and they knocked out Jessup. But we lost Dyke New Hartford and Osage last night, and then we've got Cedar Falls going tonight. So your thoughts about what we've seen so far and what's ahead?
Well, let's look at what's ahead first. Cedar Falls gets Council Bluffs Abe Lincoln in the 6:35 game, and it's an interesting matchup. Council Bluffs Abe Lincoln hasn't been there since 2000. They have a roster that's pretty tall. They go 6'9", and they're balanced, 4 guys in double figures. Their only loss is to a team from Minnesota, and I don't think they play quite the strength of schedule, let's say, a Mississippi Valley Conference team does, but they have played some quality opponents this particular year. Cedar Falls has been playing very, very well. The Tigers have gotten their, what I was considering their big three going. Now that Green's playing well, Fagan's there, and Trey LeBeau is back in the starting lineup and gives that rotation a lot of athleticism. And they have some guys off the bench that can help a little bit too. Just because these two teams are so unfamiliar with each other, it's a little hard to get a read for how it'll go, but I think it'll be a pretty tough game for the Tigers, you know, with this particular team. Now going backwards, Dyke New Hartford went in as the 1 seed in 2A, and they played a Pella Christian team that was seeded 8th, even though it didn't have a loss to a 2A school. They lost all their games to 3A, 4A opponents, so it gives you an idea of how much you rely on the seeding system. Nick will probably speak to that more in a minute, but it was a good ball game. Until the end, Dyke New Hartford struggled and then dropped out. Gladbrook-Rhinebeck got going in the second half behind good old Mr. Smolt, who's helping himself in his college stock every passing day, it seems like. And he's outstanding player. That's all needs to be said there. And they get South O'Brien now in the semifinals. So, and I know nothing about South O'Brien, so we'll have to see how that all goes.
One more question about Cedar Falls Council Bluffs Abe Lincoln game. What's Abe Lincoln's competition out there? Do they play all the Sioux City schools?
I think they do. They play a lot, and I think play some of Nebraska a little bit. In fact, Nick and I were talking about this before we taped, and Nick, correct me if I'm wrong, but that was a pretty good Nebraska.
I think they're one of the top 4 ranked in Nebraska. They're probably their best win, but other than that, they haven't seen a ton of tough competition out there.
Typically, though, there's a couple of pretty good teams in South Sioux City and in Sioux City proper, so I'm guessing their schedule is reflective, or their record is comparable to Cedar Falls. So
the thing is, with them, they have to play some smaller schools to fill out the schedule. I think that's where the uncertainty is. So, but again, that doesn't necessarily mean they're not good. I mean, it just means that we just don't know how they'll respond to this level of competition down in Des Moines.
That'll be fun. All right, back up a little bit. Nick, you saw the games last night. What are your takeaways from the Gladbrook game, the Osage game, and the Dyke New Hartford game?
Well, with the Gladbrook game, just like you mentioned, Jill Smolt really, I think he took that game towards the end of the half. Jessup was going to play for the last shot. I think they might have shot it a little too early, and then Joe hits one there going into the half, and then just gets going that third quarter. 27 points in the second half. That's how you close up a game, and that Gladbrook-Rhinebeck group, from sport to sport, it's just a group of winners. They've been in the mix and everything, and they know how to play together. The moment's not going to scare them, and I really wouldn't pass them to repeat as the 1A champions. Osage, they just never got into it against Cascade, as you guys are familiar with. That's a team. They have some big guys. They play their 2-3 zone. They put their big guy in the middle of that. It's tough to score on them, and Coach Marshall over there has done a tremendous job with them, and that was just a really tough first-round matchup there for Osage. Dyke New Hartford Pella Christian was a great game. Dyke kind of struggled early, being able to keep Pella Christian off the boards. They had a bunch of kids that were flying in, getting some second-chance opportunities. I think Pella was up by as many as 10 in the first half, and then all of a sudden Dyke, they really got their composure back. They have a great balance within that team. Like I mentioned in the story, 10 seniors. You don't see that too much at a school that size, and they got back into that game, took the lead, and I think they were up, even as many as 8 in the fourth quarter, and it was just a matter of Pella Christian making some great plays down the stretch. The final was that steal and three-pointer that Alex Pringle had to put them up, and with a minute to go, and Dyke just couldn't get any shots to fall there. But just a tremendous basketball game, and really a great season for this Dyke New Hartford program.
It continues to amaze me that Joe Smoke can get 35 points in a state tournament game against one of the supposed top 8 teams in the state. He's been doing it all year. I mean, everybody has the same scouting report. Everybody's tried everything that you can, except the kitchen sink probably, throwing at him, trying to figure out a defense to get him slowed down. And he's still good enough, and that team is still good enough to get him his shots. And he continues to put up those big numbers. It just boggles my mind sometimes that kids are able to do that. Really speaks to how special a player I think he really is.
It does, and as Nick suggested, they have behind them, the supporting cast knows how to play too. Colton Dinsdale is an interesting case in that regard. He's been a part of any number of championship teams. He was a key part of the state football championship. Then he got hurt. Beginning of the basketball season, missed a number of games, came back, and they really didn't miss a beat with him. And this team has shown that resourcefulness in the past. Camden Kickbush was hurt a year ago, and they just turned the game over to Smoltz as a sophomore, and he guided them through until Kickbush got back. So as we said, they're a tough team. They're smart. They've been through the wars, and nothing much seems to faze them.
All right, guys, good stuff. You guys are going to have courtside seats for some great basketball the rest of this week. Hopefully you'll enjoy most of that, and we need to wrap it up. As always, you can stay on top of all the local and area sports action in our print editions or at WCFcourier.com.